So once you have finished all of your pencil and you've checked it with me, then we're going to use our Sharpie to trace all the work that we've done so far. I would prefer if you could use the thicker one mostly, but if you have tiny stuff, you can use the ultra fine, but mostly the fine point. Once you're finished with all your Sharpie, go ahead and erase all the pencil to clean up our paper before our next step. Okay, the next step is we're going to add some texture to the body of our iguana. So you're going to choose a rubbing plate. There are all different kinds, but just pick one that you would like to use for the body. Actually, you could pick two if you want. And then we're going to use the crayons that already have the paper off of them. So some suggestions are the yellow, green, there's different shades of green in here, and then white is also good because when we go to the painting, these show up really nice for that texture and it looks like that iguana color. So you can go ahead and get whatever color you want out, and then you're going to put your texture plate, your rubbing plate underneath, and then you're going to lay the crayon on its side to rub. And maybe if I do two, I might move it around in different spaces on here, and then maybe you could switch to a different rubbing plate. So this one has kind of dots on it, and maybe I'll do this darker green as well. So again, I'm going to move that around. They can overlap, but we're just doing it in the body of the iguana. So it's a little harder in those tiny spaces, but we want to get those on there. So if you want to use different colors as well, we could do that. So this one you're not going to be able to see until we paint, but it will show up once we paint. You can kind of see it because the crayon's a little dirty. And then maybe I'll even do some yellow. So we're just putting texture all over the body of the iguana so that when we paint, it shows up with that nice texture. So that is, that is finished. I put texture all over the whole body. Actually, I forgot the tail, so let me go back. So I'm gonna go back to kind of the ones that I had and use those same colors so it's continuous and matching. Again, it's a little harder on these small spaces, but try your best to get some of that on there. Once you have completed that, we are going to get our watercolors out, and we are sharing these with the people we sit with at our table. And just to show you how to use these pan watercolors, you're going to get your paintbrush wet, and then I'm going to go ahead and use the green. So I'm going to get the green wet, and you kind of want a little puddle in there, and then you can paint that right over the top of your crayon that you did with that texture, and it should show up for you on that, and it resists the watercolor. Okay, now let's pretend I want a different color. So always clean your brush. Now sometimes if it's too dark, you will need to dilute it in the lid. So I put a little bit of water in the lid, and let's say I want purple because purple is very dark. You can dilute it by putting it in the lid like this, and then if I want a little bit of that, and maybe I want some purple in mixed with my green, then I can paint directly from here. That way that gives me that paint that's not going to be too dark or too opaque. So you decide on what your colors are. So I'm going to just finish with the green, sorry, because I just want him mostly green. See how that's really dark. So I'm just going to get rid of the color and use just the water to go in these spaces and paint the entire iguana. Okay, I have finished my iguana and I want to let that dry. So as a reminder, when we paint things with watercolor, you don't want to paint the same shape next to another shape that's wet. So never wet next to wet. So I could paint some of these other things, which I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now I know there's a lot of green in this rainforest, but I don't want everything to be the same shade of green. So over here in the lid now, I am gonna mix some green, clean my brush in between colors, then get my blue wet and put a little bit of blue in that. That way it'll change the shade or tint of that particular green so that I can put some of that on the tree leaf here that looks different. So that's another way to change the color so we don't have all the same shade of green. Now, if you don't mind if they go together, like I don't mind if these two blend together because they're gonna be similar, but I wanna also change those as I go along. And that's okay if you touch wet next to wet if that's the case. So I'm gonna go ahead and add just some. I'm not gonna paint all of this because I wanna have some more variety in my greens. So I'm just gonna kind of put some in here and then paint the rest next class once it's dry. These are my vines, so I'm just gonna put a little bit of green on those. And I'm not painting everything, just putting a little bit in there. And then I can also make another one over here. I'm gonna do a yellow green. So I'm gonna put green in there, clean my brush, and then get my yellow wet. Put the yellow in here. That's another way to make another shade of that green so that they're not all the same. Then that way I can add some of that in here. That gives you variety, it makes it look more interesting. And so then you can always paint whatever's not wet next to wet. Now I'm gonna stop for today, or if it's time to clean up, then we can start doing this cleanup method. So make sure you clean out your brush really well in your cup and then squeeze out the water. And those can lay on your tray, that means they've been cleaned. And then we have a sponge on our table to clean the lid. So you're gonna use that, and as long as it's wet and then squeezed out, it should be able to clean your lid. Now, if it gets too dirty, you can go ahead and rinse your brush, your sponge at the sink, but you can see I already did 3 colors and I'm fine. So use the different corners or the center, but you need to clean out all of those. And then we leave this open so that it can dry out correctly. You're gonna empty your water and get new fresh water, only filling it halfway. Your whole tray will go on the drying rack, and I will pull those off next class.